My name is Renee Sobering, and I serve the amazing people of the Denver Boulder area in the amazing state of Colorado. Today we're talking about title companies, what they are, and how they serve you. So imagine that there are two people. One person has a briefcase full of cash, and one person has a little piece of paper called a deed. And they meet in a parking lot, and they slowly approach each other, and they look each other up and down, and they slowly start to hand over their items. Eventually, they're both holding both items, and then at some point, they both have to take a leap of faith and let go and hope that the other person will let go as well, and they each end up with their half of the deal. One ends up with the cash, one ends up with the deed. Simple, right? Sounds a little bit back alley, doesn't it? Well, it's a lot of money, and that is how a real estate transaction would feel if it were two complete strangers just doing this completely on their own. So how do we mitigate this? How do we make each other feel safe that the other person is going to help hold up their end of the deal without backing out or running away or taking the cash and making a break for it? Well, it's a title company. So when you buy a home, one of the costs that you're going to see on your closing sheet is for the title company or the escrow company, depends on which state you're in. But I promise it's not scary. The escrow can be a scary word for people. It's not scary. It's absolutely worth paying for, and I'm going to tell you why. The title company's role, it is specifically designed to protect you. It acts as a neutral third party to make sure that each side of the transaction, the buyer and the seller, they do exactly what they promised. And that protection makes the title company's cost worth its weight in gold, maybe more, just because it's peace of mind. So here are the ways that the title company protects you. Number one, they prevent fraud. And when you're dealing with a transaction that deals in this much money, it's all about trust. I mean, and that's the biggest obstacle to any real estate transaction. It's trust. The buyer has to trust that the seller will hand over the deed, and the seller has to trust that the buyer will hand over the money. So that level of trust is a lot to ask from two complete strangers. It creates a big possibility for fraud, and the title company is there to take all of that risk away from both parties, making fraud nearly impossible. The title company protects the buyer from fraud by holding the funds until the seller sends the deed. The title company protects the buyer from fraud by holding the deed until the buyer sends the funds. So neither the buyer nor the seller need to trust each other. They just need to trust the title company. Number two, they hold the buyer's deposit money, also known as earnest money. If you've never purchased a home before, typically when you purchase or when you sign your contract, you will put down an initial deposit of about 1%. This earnest money deposit basically tells the sellers that you are serious, and it also activates the contracts between both parties, or the contract between both parties. The title company protects the buyer by ensuring that the seller doesn't keep the deposit if the buyer backs out of the deal before any of the deadlines set forth in the contract, meaning legally. There are a few different legal ways that a buyer can back out of a sales contract. We'll talk about that in a different episode. But it also protects the seller by ensuring that the buyer doesn't try to reclaim their deposit if they break the contract and back out of the deal after one of those deadlines or not in a non-legal manner. Number three, they keep the payments from going to the seller prematurely. So throughout the home buying process, there are a lot of important contingencies, which I mentioned earlier, that need to be gone through before the seller gets paid. The buyer may request repairs after the inspection. The bank needs to give final approval on the loan. The buyer may even have a home to sell before they agree to purchase the new one. So the title company protects the buyer by ensuring that all of these contingencies are met before the seller gets paid, so the buyer doesn't end up paying for a home that doesn't meet their expectations. Now, they also protect the seller by ensuring that all of these contingencies are tracked and documented as they are met, so the buyer can't come back later and claim that something wasn't done. Now, I understand that most people feel overwhelmed when they first look at that closing sheet, that list of closing costs. And I know the last thing that people want to do is pay more than they need to. But using a title company is imperative because it protects you as a buyer or a seller or both. Throughout the transaction, I work closely with the title agent to make sure that all the contingencies and deadlines are met. And I always review the closing cost worksheet with my clients, line by line, so you know exactly what you're paying for. So if you are thinking about making a move, I can help you through the entire process. Just send me a text or call me at 406-697-4294, and I will give you the help and guidance that you need. Again, that's 406-697-4294. If you're a resident of the Denver Boulder area and you'd like more information on events, what's happening in your community, real estate, check out Denver Boulder Living on Facebook. Give us a like, check out our YouTube channel and subscribe there. And you can also find us on Instagram. So please feel free to post any questions or comments or concerns in the chat box. And I always go back to check the videos after the live stream is over to answer any questions that are there as well. Okay, thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next episode.